I'm going to tell you a story. This story is based on a well-known tale in Chinese folklore, the story of Mengzi's mother. Today, I want to talk about learning and about knowledge and about values. Education is based on two principles, knowledge and values, that gives rise to the golden triangle. I'm going to explain this by using a story, the story of Mengzi's mother. I want to tell you a variant of the story of Mengzi's mother. Mengzi lived with his mother near a graveyard. The mother thought the environment was not conducive to the proper development of her son. So she moved to a busy marketplace. The son learned to yell and scream. It was not an environment conducive to learning. Then she finally moved to near a school, and her son adopted the local customs and traditions, such as reading and writing. Mengzi's mother aimed for knowledge for her son, but her decisions were driven by her values. Now, today I want to tell you about the story of Mengzi. He is about 35 years old, successful businessman. His mother was a great admirer of Mengzi's mother. She was constantly thinking of her son's education and well-being. One day, she was trying to fix a chair and asked for his help. He needed a few wood stakes, so he proceeded to measure the lengths needed. For the diagonal piece, his mother reminded him that it did not need to be measured, it could be calculated. He was surprised. Of course, it was easy to measure it, but the idea of the calculation was intriguing. His mother asked whether he had seen the two-legged theorem at school. He remembered it very well, written on a mathematics book, but he had no idea what it had to do with the broken chair. So she explained. If you look at the lengths of the wood stakes that you need, they can be represented by numbers A, B, and C. And because they form a right triangle, these lengths need to satisfy this beautiful equation. This is the equation which is the basis for the two-leg theorem, which happens to be true everywhere, for broken chairs, out on space, on a lake, on the field, everywhere. And such realization was a great discovery for Mengzi. This propelled his interest in mathematics. Years later, he found that this theorem also works in 3 dimensions. At that point, mathematics became his love. Many years later in university, he learned of the work of the French mathematician Joseph Fourier, who showed in 1822 that sound waves, like the ones that make up music, have exactly the same mathematical properties as the two-leg theorem. And this became Mengzi's passion. He learned how this can be used to digitize music, put it on a smartphone, and bring songs in your pocket everywhere. He discovered on his own how the same mathematics can be used to do pattern recognition in other contexts. He learned about the Greek mathematician Pythagoras, who said something very remarkable. He said, "Nature is written in the language of numbers." By the way, he's one of the creators of the two-leg theorem, which he did about 2,500 years ago. Young Pythagoras used to walk by a forge on his way to school. There, he saw how they made iron rods. They were put into the fire, and when the fire made them soft, they would hit them into shape. When they are hit, they produce a certain sound. And he saw that the sound was different every day. They were doing many of these rods at the same time, so the sounds he could hear, they were never isolated. The sounds he could hear came in groups, say groups of 2 or sometimes 3. Sometimes those sounds would sound very pleasing to the eye. Other times they didn't. And he became curious what was in perhaps the lengths of those rods that would give rise to these good sounding combinations or bad sounding combinations. And he found something remarkable. If the lengths of these rods are given by numbers, say P and Q, the fraction that you obtain when you divide them, P divided by Q, could be written in fractional form with the smallest numbers P and Q being integers. And he saw that if P and Q are small, the sound sounds good. But if they cannot be made small, if P and Q have to stay large, it sounds bad. This had a very interesting application, which was if you take a square and you look at this two lengths, one is the length of the side and the other one is the length of the diagonal. These two lengths are in a proportion which is exactly the square root of 2, which he knew cannot be written as the division between two integers. This is what's called an irrational number. Because of that, one would think that these two lengths in combination would produce sounds which sound bad. And that's actually true. This chord, when you play these two notes at the same time, is what's called a tritone. And they are known in classical music to sound not very well together. If you have strings of this length in a piano, where the lengths are multiples of square root of 2 with each other, then they don't sound very well. This actually happens to be a very well-known chord. If you play these two notes, the B and the F note together, their frequencies are exactly at the square root of 2 multiple of each other. The ratio of these two frequencies is exactly the square root of 2. It denotes tension because of our inability to express the square root of 2 as a rational number. On the other hand, if the ratio of lengths is a pleasing small rational number like 4 divided by 5, this gives rise to a very well-known, very pleasing sound, which is what's called the third, the major third. And furthermore, if you take the tension chord with the F and the B, and then you take the pleasing chord with the C and the E, this is what's called a resolution. You go from one chord with tension to another chord with joy. After learning all of this, Mengzi went on to become a great professional, creating several companies in the AI space. He accumulated a lot of wealth and used some of that to develop a project for the school of his daughter. He decided to turn his wealth into the creation of a new school. A school that will actively involve all of the students in the creation of knowledge. So he quickly went and spoke to the principal. He had an idea in mind. He wanted to grow a smart vegetable garden. What is that? It's one which is full with fruit trees, vegetables to eat, and flowers for their scents and beauty. Then you fill it with sensors to measure temperature, humidity, water quality, wind, and other interesting variables. And finally, you create a computer system that collects all of the garden data in real time, stores it, and makes it available to all the children in the school. In this school, all students participate. The youngest students clean the sensors daily, check the wires for damage. Others check that the power supply is working and clean the fields of debris. The older ones build and check the databases. The most advanced ones create apps so all of the students can check the variables in real time. His daughter wakes up very early every morning and rushes to check the latest measurements coming from the fields. She has heard stories of the floods of 2023 and 2024 and is concerned that if they return, they can pose harm to her family, and her plants. She thinks there may be something in the observations that she collects that could alert her if danger is coming. It will be years later that she will learn about data and how it is used to learn about the environment, our health, and our well-being. What you learn on your own, you never forget. Shi Hui is watching her granddaughter. She does not fully understand what she is doing with all that technology, but she knows that it is the same process of discovery her son underwent with a broken chair, only that this time experiential learning happened before the academic one. And she knows that she has an important role to play. She does not understand the technologies her granddaughter is using, but she understands her values and knows that her role is to ensure values must always drive discoveries. She is determined to tell everyone how to find the right environments. She is also determined to make sure everyone knows the value of music, dance, stories, and love. This story tells us the value of having the right environment, the value of relationships. It tells us that education is based on knowledge and values.